Good morning from the Silicon Valley, San Francisco, USA, and greetings to you. Good afternoon, evening, late night, and good morning to you from wherever you're patching in, those coming in live today, and to all of you checking us out later on YouTube. Welcome to ISSIP's 2024 event series exploring AI challenges to global democracy. I'm Michelle Carroll, Executive Director of ISSIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals, and it is my privilege to work with these two ISSIP ambassadors on this important topic in this critically important year for global democracy. Kazuyoshi Shimada, who recently served, is a newly appointed ISSIP ambassador and recently served for the past 3 years in Japan's Science and Technology's Washington, D.C. office, and recently moved back to Japan, where he manages the Office of Diversity and Inclusiveness. And Kazu is the leader of the concept of hosting this series in the first place. Dr. Christine Leitner is a longtime ISSIP ambassador who leads the HSSE, Human Side of Service Engineering Conference, which is an important ISSIP collaboration every year. Christine is co-founder and senior advisor to the Center for Economics and Public Administration in London, where she focuses on public sector innovation programs. And she's also served for more than 10 years as the senior policy advisor to the Austrian Ministry of Labor and Economy. Both bring so much expertise and perspective and skill to this series. ISSIP is grateful for their leadership. I also want to acknowledge the immense support that has been Jim Spoor, ISSIP co-founder and board director, who is manning the chat for you this morning and catching comments. Please do mute yourself if you're not the speaker on screen, and we encourage you to use the chat to ask questions, which we'll do our best to respond to over the course of our 1 hour together, or to share any information you want to share and make comments as well. So this is the third in our 3-part series. So this is the finale event. And there will be a white paper, which Kazu is also going to lead development of, pulling together the threads of content. You'll see the themes that have been raised, the discussion, and we'll be publishing that in the 4th quarter. It also pulls heavily on the survey, which is in the field, and you'll see a link in the chat to our survey on the topic of AI impacts. In our 1 hour together, I'm going to show you the preliminary findings of that survey, what you're telling us now about what you think those impacts are. And then Kazu will set the stage for today's conversation, recapping the first 2 events in the quadrant analysis we've come to really appreciate from him, cleanly pulling in what has already been said, and then moving into today's conversation. We'll introduce our panelists, Hiro Hamada with Araya, Lee Nachman, who writes the Substack on Win-Win Democracy, and Paul Timmers of the EU Commission, now ISSIP, Oxford University, who will each share about 7 minutes, their perspectives on the topic. And then that should leave us with a good 20 minutes of moderated discussion. We encourage you to ask your questions in the chat, and Kazu and Christine will be moderating that conversation. And we will close out promptly at the top of the hour. And again, call you to please complete the survey. And we will be publishing the white paper in the 4th quarter. So to the survey, what are you telling us? At our June event, we had about 50 responses. We're up to 61. We'd love to get more in, so please do complete the survey. Super short, 4 questions, and you'll see the link in the chat. When asked, do you think AI presents more opportunity or threat? We continue to see just over half, 55%, see equal opportunity and threat to democracy posed by AI. On the threat, within the threat, far and away, our community sees bad actor manipulation as the scariest thing. And then on the opportunity side, though, a lot of different opportunities continue to crop up, and the most dominant, if you'd say, at 29, almost 30%, enhanced access and election participation. and then process automation. And in that very short survey, the fourth and final question is, our offer to you to provide your position statement. And as is usually the case in ISSIP community, we've got at least 3/4 of the folks saying, yes, please include that perspective. And you do have the option of including, but without your company or organization cited. You can personally submit. So with that, I want to turn it over to the meat of our conversation today, to Kazu, to introduce, set the stage for the conversation. Kazu, over to you.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, joining this series of sessions, the start of the session of our discussion on AI challenges to democracy, AI challenges to global democracy. At first, I would like to summarize our 2 sessions we had. At the first session, we tried to discuss about the current state of play of the AI issues on global democracy, and we got a brief browser review of risks and benefits of AI and democracy. And there was a 4 quadrants section by the benefits and risks of current AI and future AI. And it's mapped out about the risk of AI, which was frequently discussed among our society, about the manipulation of information by bad actors. And also we mentioned about the benefits about the radically enhanced data gathering and analysis, or realizing democracy through new ways of laying new bricks towards a new democracy. That's an expectation of our expectation of the AI for the future democracy. And at the second session, we discussed about what are some efforts to develop current benefits and limit risks to maximize the benefits of future AI for our democracy. And we discussed about what kind of major challenges we are going to face when we utilize AI, exploring the democratic opportunity throughout the 4 quadrants. And the major challenges identified at the second session directed to this session, third session, to discuss the theme of research, development, and funding priorities. That's our planned structure of a discussion. And at the second session, we discussed about the new frontier or new narratives, discussing about the aiming at the new opportunities for the business, if based on the efforts to filling the gap between the risks of current AI and the benefits of the future AI. Of course, we can aiming at the better informed citizenry, at the representation of the historically marginalized people, and the broader and the active participation in democracy and voting, etc. And there are many expectations for the future, different type of democracy utilizing the AI. But we also discuss about, do we have the same notion of the democracy in the future? So we, at the second session, we mentioned about roughly 3 points. One is adding a lens of inclusion to see new opportunities. We can find as a new role of nations or new opportunities for the business as well. And also, in order to achieve such kind of environment, it is not easy to found or nurturing the shared foundation of this development of the new AI enhanced democracy. And also, we also discuss about the clear vision of the new structure of democracy utilizing the AI. It might be shown by the former theoretician of democracy, but it has not been realized by a technically feasible way. But in this era, we might be able to start discussion about how we can you how we can how we can realize such kind of a democracy in the future. As well, we can also envision the new ways of realizing democracy, better democracy in the future. So it's the envisioning the new structure of the democracy is also a very good discussion agenda for the future. So today, we would, as a last session, we would like to set the good, what can I say? As a result of our discussions, we aim to formulate key questions for the ISSIP and broader community to guide future research, development, and funding priorities. And we asked all panelists to present what key questions do you have to the ISSIP community and the broader community to guide future research, development, and funding priorities. That's a very brief summarize of the past discussion in our serious discussions. Yes, Christine, do you have any other additional comments for the past discussion and the expectation for the today's discussion?
Thank you, Kazuo. Just very briefly, because you summarized very clearly our last discussions. And as you know, the whole debate is going on everywhere at the international level in social media. Discussions on AI are very broad. Everybody's talking about it. So our purpose here was to sort of recap what are the issues and basically identify what are the key questions that the service science community should deal with. And for that purpose, Kazuo, as the lead, is going to draft, and we're going to help him, and I hope you all will help him to draft a white paper where we're going to summarize the key areas and key questions we would like to see, or we think would be useful for the service science community. Now, one of the key points is really that we are convinced that we need a more interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach to bring together the communities, including humanities, which are not really that involved in the debate, but also political scientists and policymakers and the legal aspects or regulatory experts in that discourse. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over back to you, Kazu, to lead the discussions. Or I think Michelle is going to introduce one of our speakers, but I think Kazu, you will be taken over, and I'm looking forward to our discussions. Thank you so much, Kazu. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. So let's start the discussion. But first, we would like to ask the panelists to input their insights about the broader and further expectation for the research communities. And I would like to invite Hiro, who was the panelist of the first session, and I also invited him to the third session as well. And he, as you know, he is a senior researcher and the principal researcher of Araya, and he received his PhD in systems neuroscience at Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology in 2019. His research interests are cognitive neuroscience and computational neuroscience and phenomenology for consciousness. And he participated in the project as a principal investigator for Goal 9, Realization of Mental Health and the Dynamic Society by increasing peace of mind and vitality by 2050 of the Cabinet Office of Japanese Government Moonshot Research and Development Program. Hiro, thank you very much for joining, and floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot for giving me opportunities to talk about it. So I want to share my slides, but seemingly I'm not allowed to do. Oh yeah, now I can do it. Thank you. So yeah, let me. Yeah, thank you very much for giving me opportunities. So today's the talk is not something I usually do, but this year I had a chance to talk with the people who actually working on this digital democracy, and behind their activity, there's a kind of philosophy so-called plurality. So I want to share that what they are thinking about. So recently we had this Tokyo governor elections, and one of the candidate actually use the AI as a kind of the avatar to answer to the like a citizen's comments. So not just one person, answer to the citizen, response to the citizen. He actually used this AI avatar to get a response as answers from the citizens. So this is the kind of one examples. Recently, people started using AI as for the democracy, and but historically, this is like pretty much he's influenced by Taiwanese actual movement, including Audrey Tang. She is a kind of leader of this digital democracy in East Asia. And she actually introduced this open source tool to actually for the voting in a Congress. It's called the Police. And that one function of this is to show somehow what is the political issues right now that people are talking about. This is like a tool to visualize such kind of problems. And seemingly this digital democracy is not just about the Asian movement, becoming that more, I think, global somehow. It's the case I introduced today is mostly from the US or North America, but so Audrey Tan actually also worked together with Graham Wiles from this. He's from Microsoft Foundations, and this is not about AI, but some people started working on like how we can input the citizen's voice to the AI for more fair use of AIs. And yeah, this time I want to talk about a little bit more about this plurality concept and this radical exchange where Audrey Tan and Graham Wiles work together with. They say that this plurality concept is about technology for collaborative diversity and democracy. So they want to have more diverse voice into the AI to considering the diverse perspective. And however, this is like this technological concept came from the more like a political concept, like a more theoretical concept. So I think the reason why they wanted to introduce this idea is that the current AI system has a big threat to just a more singular or like a few number of the voice only considered. And maybe like they are reflecting the historical background that's before the World War II, Germany had some kind of problems. The idea is Carl Schmitt. He's a kind of backbone of Nazis. The concept of politics is to dividing the friend and enemy. That is a kind of idea. But Hannah Arendt, sorry, like I put the Japanese here, but what she told and is that human has a radical pluralism within or humanity. So we have to consider such things, and AI should be also considered. That is a kind of message Audrey Tan and Graham was making of. And interestingly, actually, those concepts are really influenced by some philosopher that he was born in Japan, Koji Karatani, and he published a paper, book about the history of the yes, sorry, the structure of world history, and like that Audrey Tang was fully influenced by him. And one of the candidate I introduced, Anno, he also influenced by one of the kind of people I listed here, Hiroki Azuma or Ken Suzuki, on those people. So seemingly this is the digital democracy fully influenced by their ideas. And I want to just, at the very end, I want to introduce this Ken Suzuki, his thought. The idea is that he found he's also actually working in a US as well. He found that right now we have like a big wall somehow in the political regions. It's like a Berlin Wall, but he wanted to use the technology to somehow bridging a gap as a kind of smooth transform, not the divisions, not just the dividing them, just more making a bridge, like a more little bit smooth functions. That are kind of his ideas. He called it as kind of Nameraka society. So hoping that we can have such kind of stuff, not just dividing people to boost the plurality in a humanity. And I'm not so sure that like those ideas, is kind of effective. But at least I think it's worth to try. And some people started working on this kind of stuff, how we can utilize AI as a kind of inoculations or protections for our own programs. And yeah, there are several attempts are going on in crypto or like Tokyo elections, and also some theoretical studies going on. So hopefully we can do more experiment, this kind of thing, how we actually in a real setup react to those technology. I think a key question is that we cannot really estimate outcome of those using those tools. So yeah, even somehow I think we are open to those kind of stuff, but at the same time, it's also cautious about it. So yeah, this is the kind of message I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hiro. Michelle, could you please introduce Lee as the next speaker?
Yes, let me. So and thank you, Hiro. Those were fascinating charts. And it's exactly the Berlin Wall. The idea with this series was how then do we scale that Berlin Wall? And as we were thinking who should be the right speakers to bring in on this topic as ISSIP, elevating the conversation, how can service science help? How can we get objectively into productive conversation? Jim immediately thought of Lee Nachman. So because he is the founder and writer of the Win-Win Democracy Substack. So quick intro of Lee. Dr. Lee Nachman is a retired software executive whose career spanned technical and management with global leaders, IBM, Microsoft, HP, and he served in startup environments. He's been with a startup, an angel investor, a board member, and an independent consultant. And now he writes the Win-Win Democracy Substack. Lee earned his Bachelor of Science from Brown University and PhD from UNC Chapel Hill, both in computer science. He's co-authored a book, published 50 papers, and holds 3 patents. He's local in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, USA, where he lives with his family. He's active in democracy and social action. Lee has served as co-president of Kehila Synagogue in Chapel Hill, is a member of their board and co-chair of social action for the synagogue. He's also served as president of the Progressive Caucus of the North Carolina Democratic Party, volunteers with Neighbors on Call, and is on the board of the Orange County Justice Project in North Carolina. So let me pull up Lee's presentation and share with you. It's up now for the sharing part. I think, Hiro, can you have stop share? I'm not seeing.
Yeah,
share.
I think I stepped it. Mhm.
Sorry, one sec. Here we go. The joys of technology. Hey?
Thanks, Michelle. And I guess I have to ask you to forward this, to switch the slides. Is that correct?
Yes, please.
I'm pleased to be here. Thanks to Jim Spohr for inviting me and the whole team for inviting me. And I'd like to make a few remarks about the relationship of AI and democracy. Next, please. So, you know, there's a lot of worry, I think, around the world about the potential negative impacts that AI could have. And as a result of that, there's a lot of discussion about using regulation by the government or governments to control AI. And I believe that we will see regulation, but that it will not be very effective. And the reason I think that that's the case is because of who the stakeholders are. There are unbelievably large amounts of money that are being invested in AI around the world. I mean, I'm more familiar with the data in the US than in other parts of the world, but you know, all of the major tech companies are pursuing AI as if they don't win, whatever that means, if they don't win in AI, they're not going to exist. So, you know, I'm talking about Microsoft, I'm talking about Google, and you know all the names, right? Yeah, I don't need to tell you that. So those companies are pursuing AI as their future. They have tremendous economic assets. They employ tremendous numbers of people around the world. And there's going to be a lot of regulators are going to listen to what they have to say because of the financial impact, the impact on jobs, and the potential impact on the broader economy. I believe we're already seeing this, that these companies will say, we want to be regulated because we recognize that there are dangers. But I think in practice, what's happening is what they really want are safe harbors. In other words, they want a situation where if something bad happens as a result of their AI technology, they want to be able to say, we're really sorry that this bad thing happened, but you know, we followed all the regulations, right? So they want kind of an excuse if something bad happens. And that's, I think, the direction that they're pushing for in their request to be regulated. I think there are two other important reasons that AI regulation is not going to be effective. The major militaries of the world all believe that AI, you know, is a crucial technology for both offensive and defensive roles that the military will play. And they're not going to stop doing what they think is important for their military because of regulation, because they're going to say the other countries that are, you know, our enemies, if you will, are going to be pursuing this. And similarly, the same thing's happening, I think, in terms of economic rivalry, where, you know, in the United States, we're going to say, you know, we have to pursue AI as strongly as possible because China's going to do it, right? And I think that that is going to prevent us from imposing, us being the US, from imposing strong regulations on US-based companies. And I think that's going to be true around the world. So my remarks really are premised on this belief that we should not count on regulation of AI to protect us from some of the dangers of AI. Next slide, please. So I would like to see us take a different approach. I think that we have some serious existing problems with disinformation in our democracies. I see this in the United States, you know, tremendously. And I'll give you a simple story. There in a local election, a candidate was photographed in a shirt that had his name across the chest of the shirt. and he was doing some cleanup work in a local park. And his opponent took that picture and replaced the candidate's name on the shirt, I guess using Photoshop, and it said defund the police. Now, this candidate was a liberal candidate running against a very conservative candidate, and defund the police was code to the conservative voters. You want to vote against this guy. I say this because this was done without AI. This was just done with Photoshop. AI makes disinformation so much easier to do. I've seen fake videos of President Biden calling for mobilization of the draft. It's stuff that would have been extremely expensive and difficult before is now easy. So I think disinformation is made a lot worse by AI, or the potential for disinformation. We also have issues of concentration of wealth and power. It takes a lot of money and a lot of political power to develop AI. We have obvious worries about what will AI do to people who are working. Will lower their standard of living by making jobs, make there being fewer jobs. And then we also see already lots of issues around theft of intellectual property in the training of AI. And this is both written and artistic intellectual property. And what is that going to do to the role of the arts in our democracies? So my belief is that the way we should attack these issues is that we should use policy and regulation to address the underlying problems. And by doing so, we will reduce the harmful impacts of AI. Next slide, please. So here's an example with disinformation. So disinformation, one problem is that people can say stuff without being accountable for what they say. So digital signing of content is an approach that we might work on. And what kind of role could digital signing of content and verification of the real identity of people who post on social media have, so that people are actually responsible for what they say and do? In the United States, there's a law called Section 230 that was created in the early days of the internet, which makes platforms like Google or Facebook not liable for the content that's posted on those platforms. So one area of research that I'd like to see is what would happen if we change Section 230 and said to the platforms that you're liable for posts by unverified people of unsigned content, but people who are verified people who post signed content, the platform is not liable. That might change the willingness of social platforms to control some of the disinformation that is being promulgated from their platforms. Next, please. So I would like to see us, in terms of our research needs, that we should look at approaches to reduce existing threats to democracy and enhance those research efforts to also look at the role of AI in those contexts. So thank you very much.
Oh, Kazu, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Lisa. Christine, could you please introduce Paul as the next speaker, panel speaker?
Well, thank you, Kazu, and thank you, Lee and Hiro, for the thought-provoking presentations. I think we'll have an interesting discussion with Paul now, particularly on the regulatory part. And I'm very honored and very happy that, Paul, you could join us. Paul is, I said before, the T-shaped sort of model for me. He has a long-standing experience in public administration at the EU level, so in the European Commission, dealing with various technology aspects, starting with cybersecurity, EID, digital health, smart cities inclusion, And of course, digital government. He also advised a previous commissioner in policies in that regard. He's also been dealing with EU funding programs. So I'm hoping we get also some insights here from Paul on opportunities for international collaboration. But he has now moved to research again. So he is, among others, research associate at Oxford University, adjunct professor at European University in Cyprus, visiting professor at the Catholic University in Leuven, but he's also the chair of the supervisory board of the Estonian E-Governance Academy, and many more things I won't mention in detail. One thing, probably also a research fellow in the Center on Regulation in Europe. He has also a background in business, startup, and big companies in the IT. So very comprehensive background, and I'm looking forward, Paul, to your comments, your statement.
Thank
Paul,
you so
floor is
much,
yours.
Christine. I think you can hear me. And thank you so much to the very welcoming organizing team and to pose also this challenge. I look forward to an interesting discussion. So given that time is limited, I will focus just on a few elements, talking about AI and democracy, and also mentioning some R&D funding opportunities. If I can have the next slide. So I will say something about what is happening at the EU level and give some pointers for not only the EU AI Act, so a regulatory approach, but also the EU AI coordinated plan and opportunities in this for research and also for engaging internationally in research. And then make some observations more from my personal perspective, perhaps T-shaped observations, as Christine calls it, about a wider context and some specific challenges, global governance, legitimacy, and AI and law as is. Let's take the next slide. So the EU AI Act is actually the first comprehensive regulation on AI in the world, and of course applicable to the European Union. And the European Union, as you know, consists of 27 member states, and this is applicable for all 27 member states. And it's market access regulation, meaning you have to fulfill certain conditions if you want to sell your AI stuff in the European Union. That's what amounts to. And that means you have to assess risk that your AI can bring. And that goes from no risk or minimal risk, limited risk, high risk, to absolutely unacceptable AI. So for example, AI for mass surveillance, for social scoring is prohibited. You cannot sell that in the EU. There may be high risk AI that you need to use in certain cases, for example, applied in the medical field, just to give an example. And there's AI that has more limited risks or minimal risks. Generally, you have to do assessment of the risk, either you yourself as a producer, as a developer, as someone who puts the AI in the market, or you have to, when it's the higher risk type of AI, you have to have independent third-party based risk assessment. So risk assessment, the risk approach is very important. And it also means, of course, that when you assess risk, there can always be a residual risk. So this does not say that something cannot go wrong, absolutely, but you want to prevent things going wrong as much as possible. While this law was being developed, we saw the introduction of ChatGPT, the rise of generative AI. And then in this law, also general purpose AI is included. So what we consider generally now as the foundation models or generative AI, not in itself considered as high risk, but it can be used for high risk purposes. So there are additional obligations on the producers of these models. And then an interesting thing that fits also within this is, first of all, it says that the law is not absolutely always complete, so to say, and doesn't give always the answer. So you need to experiment. And there are regulatory sandboxes included in this law, where you can actually find out how would it work when you apply the law, but on elements where it's not completely defined, and you have these new technology developments and new uses of the technology. Important within this is you have to see it immediately in the context of this is not the only aspect that has to do, or not the only regulation that is related to the digital world. For example, in Europe, you have also the Digital Services Act, which is about content regulation, and Digital Markets Act, which is about platform regulation. Moving quickly forward, next slide. This is a part actually of a larger EU AI coordinated plan, which has the law, but also has R&D funding in a large program, Horizon Europe. And there's quite a lot of support there and many projects that you already will see running today on AI and democracy. And many of them also address the aspect of inclusion, participation, deliberative democracy, the things that also Hero alluded to. So I just give some icons here of KT4D, which is about knowledge technologies for democracy, AI for Gov, which is about better public services, and also more deployment-oriented work. So not so much experimental and research, but more putting it to use that is financially supported, such as a European Digital Media Observatory that looks for disinformation and tries to counter disinformation, particularly hot in Europe, because we have had a whole series of elections and have also really had a lot of disinformation happening. You know, we are a continent that has at its east front a war going on, and you can imagine where some of the disinformation is coming from. Then other actions, for example, making high-performance computing available for small companies to use AI, and much more has been announced for the near future, because now there is a new political leadership coming in at the European level. The European Commission is renewed, and the European Parliament has just been renewed. So, for example, an initiative to provide supercomputing for AI startups, better public services promotion with the help of AI, the European AI Research Council, and the European Democracy Shield, which is actually a further reinforcement of using AI and also other tools in order to strengthen democracy. So there's a big challenge because democracy is really under threat. It's not without reason that these kind of things are being funded at European level. Hundreds of millions of euros are involved in this, often also open for international collaboration. So I think good to look for this. Okay, let's take the next slide. Some of the comments that I want to make. If we take the next slide, and then there's a few things that I want to stress, and that's actually that I think we need to really look at this topic in a contextual way and in a systemic way. And actually, as several have said, in an interdisciplinary way. Par excellence, this is about interdisciplinarity. And so these are my observations. I'm a lot involved in research on technology and geopolitics, and there is definitely that wider context. Our democracy in Europe is threatened because there are authoritarian regimes. I think Lee rightly pointed to it, the capture of AI by big tech, by big capital is a great concern. That's geoeconomics, and it's used for a purpose also. There's a war going on, and we are very concerned about that. There are wars, several wars going on. Security is conditioning this debate, populism, the concerns around the planet, and the role of big tech, the dominance of big tech. So let me mention a few cases. One is that when I'm involved in a project called REMIT, which is about technology and multilateralism, and that studies, amongst others, how can you do global AI governance. So it may be important that the European Union has regulation, has promotional programs, but how do you do this internationally? Because AI often is without borders, and much of the AI is certainly not produced in Europe. And this interfaces with AI and political theory. For example, theories about power, and theories about the formation of coalitions, and how so advocacy coalition framework is one of those that helps us to understand how our political opinions made. The second example that I want to mention is, as an important and also systemic type of research, is you really have to look at AI and democracy in the context, in this larger context of how democracy is operated and the institutional context. And I give you a little kind of diagram that you may not be able to read, but this is an opinion poll after in the Netherlands, not the least democratic country in the world, there was a big scandal because a very simple form of AI, classification algorithm, had been used to combat fraud with child benefits. And actually this went completely wrong, not necessarily because of the algorithm itself, although that had a bias, but also because everybody believed the algorithm, because everybody followed the instructions. No one really contested it until great degree of injustice happened. As a consequence, the public perception of government really showed an erosion of confidence in government, so an erosion of the legitimacy of government. And that's an important aspect of AI and democracy, this legitimacy of government. And more profoundly even, the point number 3 is, I think we need to also really think more seriously about the fact that sometimes we do need autonomous AI. And autonomous AI, we may not be able to avoid it. I do a lot of work, and I did a lot of work in cybersecurity. In cybersecurity, you see the use of AI. So attacks are actually AI automated. They are happening at a millisecond time scales, changing very rapidly. And the only way to combat that is that you use AI to counter these kind of attacks. But that means that AI at that moment in time, when there is a cyber attack going on, you need to allow AI to take a decision. And this can be a decision of life and death. And that should actually be subject to democratic oversight. And democratic oversight is not possible here. So law as is, the functioning of our democracy as is actually fundamentally also put to the test by, in particular, autonomous AI. And I don't think we cracked it. We need to have more research to understand this. So very rapidly, just a few thoughts. Let me stop here and hand back to the moderation.
Paul, thank you very much for your insights, and Lee and Hiro as well. Today, as a result of our discussions at the former 2 sessions, we aim to formulate key questions for the ISSIP and the broader community to guide future research, development, and funding priorities. The series of sessions and their conclusions will compiled into a white paper to be shared with you. We hope that today's discussion will contribute significantly to that conclusion. First, dear panelists, do you have any questions or additional comments on the inputs from other panelists from so far? Next, I also would like to have questions in the comments from other panelists, but first, I would like to ask panelists. Hiro, do you have any questions or comments on the others' input?
Lee?
Oh,
Yeah, sorry. Lee has a questions, or yeah, I
Lee's
just
on-
maybe do shortly. Yeah, I think it's the ideas about this regulatory sandbox is excellent. That actually as necessary steps in Japan. Yeah, that's kind of things I wanted to just comment, but.
I'd like to get some feedback from the other panelists about whether they agree with my idea about it's going to be very hard to get effective AI regulation. What's your thinking?
Yeah, but may I react to that, Lee? Because of course I agree and I disagree. So European Union, and I have been a European policy maker. We obviously think that you can achieve something with regulation, but the European Union is also not naive and is not, hopefully not, taking regulation as the only kind of magic wand. It's not like that. So you point, I think, rightly to the need to also have policy for other underlying and fundamental factors. For example, platform regulation, or you mentioned Section 230. You know, that's closely related to something that has been happening in the European Union, which is the Digital Services Act, which is actually about responsibility for content that is placed online. And you see now that some of the platforms are really put on the spot, and they have to work on taking off harmful content. And some of them don't like it. There's a certain platform X that is not very kind of helpful in this respect at the moment. And there's a whole debate, of course, going on. And then you can use the law. but it would be naive to think that you can only use the law, and also naive to think that this works in a field that is developing so quickly. And there are great concerns, of course, also, if you have only law, will you perhaps have a detrimental effect on other public interest, on innovation, on jobs, and those kind of things. Well, policy making is really difficult. I think this is the kind of thing where you say interdisciplinarity and several insights are necessary to have the right mix. And I'm not going to claim that Europe has the right mix. Europe has to prove that it has the right mix. But at least it mobilizes some tools that, I think we believe in could work. Yeah.
Okay.
Hiro, do you have any ideas on the AI regulation will fail? That was mentioned by Lee.
This part, I think it's something I think it resonates with what I think it a little bit talk about, that we can't really see the the outcome. So I think that I agree and disagree. I agree with that. I think at the moment that the effective AI regulation will fail in some sense. And very political powers of AI companies and also like a lobbying activities is quite strong. I would see, and I think it's also it's important to how we can demonstrate that that other cases we can use how we use AI and show that maybe we can go these directions. And in that cases may be like a redirecting directions of the AI startup might be a case to effectively regulate their activities, not just about a law, but about more experiments and also the lobbying activity. That might be the more interaction to be effective. That's kind of how I see, at least in Japan. It's really hard to communicate with them. Just only just looking at laws. More like communicating with them is like I see like more effective.
Here I emphasize the importance of the grassroots efforts. And Jim, please.
Yeah, I'll comment on Lee's point about identities. I really like that a lot, your point. And I'll just make the observation that in the old days when politics was local, it was a little harder to avoid taking responsibility for your opinion. So getting back to that sounds good. Could there be a startup new platform? I think there have been attempts at this, Lee, and that's the one thing I don't know off the top of my head is it seems like there may be attempts that we should study, to your point about experiments and Hiro's point about experiments. I think everybody made the point we need more experiments, and let's find those experiments and study them.
Yeah, if I can respond for a second, it's certainly true in the good old days when politicians had to stand up in front of people because that was the only way that you could communicate, that people knew who was saying whatever they were saying. But in the United States, at least, there's a long history from the earliest days of the country for anonymous pamphlets being published. And some of those anonymous pamphlets said pretty scurrilous things about the opposing candidates. So there's a long history of disinformation, at least in the United States, and I suspect everywhere, but I don't really know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, on the point of digital identity, I also happen to have been involved in the first digital identity law in Europe. And I know what kind of debate that was to get something introduced that was actually a government issued identity. So you trust, hopefully, ultimately, that the government issues it, and then you can verify that the digital identity is strong enough. And even more than that, you can then use your digital identity also to sign, for example, your tax declaration or a legal form. So, and I have a digital identity. I have three. I've got one from Belgium, one from the Netherlands, and one from Estonia, and I'm using all of them. It works very well, but in democratic deliberation, I think there are pros and cons. So you have to think about the space for free thinking, especially if you are living in a country where democracy is not functioning so well. So I'm not sure that everybody who has a different opinion about Orban wants to be known by his or her name. So you need to also have a space for free debate, but at the same time, I'm fully with you. You also need to take responsibility for what you say at some moment in time. So that should also be there. So perhaps what Hero referred to as the approach that is happening in Taiwan to make submissions and to look at the content of the submissions and then have a process going on, a deliberative process. You know, is this a good submission, a valuable submission that we like, and so we take it into the next stage of the debate, or we drop it because it's crap, you know? Perhaps that's something that works. But then, of course, Taiwan is also a democratic society where there's a lot of respect, and so I think it's another kind of very difficult question. So I think it's not a bad idea to have for all kind of purposes a digital identity that you can rely upon, but not necessarily to use it for all purposes.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I would ask panelists and the audiences about the challenges or key questions to the ISSIP communities to address as further research and development issues. Especially from the second session, we got the keywords as engagement or what can I say, participation of the public. And also in this session, we mentioned many times about the experiment in our society for the new systems. But in a crisp words, what can we say about the key questions for the next generation of the researchers?
Yeah, perhaps I'll give one comment. I think this word of experimentation is very important. So responsible experimentation and respectful experimentation, which you can introduce in many ways. You know, and everybody can apply that to their own situation, you know, their own setting. If I look at it at a European level, they are now introducing regulatory sandboxes. It's one of the possibilities, perhaps more about deliberative democracy. I would be in favor of really experimenting with the law. You know, I think, as a matter of fact, it's a bit strange that we leave it to those that want to evade the law to experiment with the law. I think we should build experimentation in the law and make that part of the process. Why not? But we don't know how it will work out and whether you can do it or not. But so I think there's a lot to be said about experimentation and looking and learning from other countries also. I know people are really looking at what is happening in Taiwan, for example, in Europe. They are very interested in it. They are very concerned about democracy. They are really looking at it, what is happening at the local level, sometimes really local level. So there's very important lessons to be learned, and I think we should take them really seriously, because we are not going to get there with the type of approach to democracy that we have today, let alone not at all with authoritarian, of course, approach. We don't want to have those.
Paul,
if I may add, Kazo, sorry.
Yeah,
No,
yes, please.
Sorry, I should have raised my hand, but it didn't work. No, just to that debate with the experimentation, I think there's also a lot going on in the OECD, trying to pull together international experiences. I think this is a very good point. I don't know if, Kazo, if you wanted to raise another one, because I had a question about deliberation and deliberative democracy and mechanisms here, Because there's a lot of talk about it, but I don't see the tools. I don't see the technological development. Could anyone sort of answer this question for me, or sort of elaborate where we should do more research? This might go to Hero, maybe, the question, but also to Lee and Paul.
Hero.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the mentioning the deliberative democracies. I also want to connect with Paul's comment, but seemingly the Taiwan's case in the 2010, they had a lot of discussion and also making a tool for encouraging the deliberative democracy in Taiwan. But seemingly the people who actually engage those activities seemingly very exhausted and like stop. Some people actually stop doing contributing those activities, and it's a bit purely based on the volunteers. And I think the deliberations is quite an important step, and yeah, people working on it, but seemingly it's also very cost for someone who actually tried to deliver to the people itself. So I think we also should learn from these lessons. Actually, like the people actually try to do it's mentally and also financially have a yeah, a lot of cost for it. And recently, people try to use large language models to pick up what is like important key issues to talk with. That actually try to reduce the cost for picking up the topics by volunteers. I'm not so sure like how much this can promote this deliberative democracy, but we also have to think about how we can actually reduce the amount of cost for these volunteers and the contributors within this this democracy. Seemingly this would be the kind of key issues I see in Taiwan, and I think we are discussing in Japan as well.
Yeah. Is there anyone who would like to add comments or questions?
The thought I have is what is our track record as the whole world in controlling other strategic technologies like nuclear, semiconductor? The same experience will probably apply in case of AI. AI will be no different when it comes to controlling strategic technologies. We have been unable to control nuclear proliferation, for example. So why it will be very different from in case of AI? That's a thought I'm having. So long as all the powerful corporations and all the powerful governments don't cooperate, everybody's for himself or for their organization, nobody will want to be part of a regulatory regime. That is the thought I'm having, observing regulation of other strategic technologies, mainly nuclear, for example. Anyway, that's a
Point.
Lee, do you have any comments on that? Yeah.
To be maybe even a little bit more pessimistic, I mean, we haven't even done a good job. I'll speak in the United States, but I think it's more broadly true. We haven't done a good job of using our tax systems and our overall economic structure to control concentration of wealth. And with concentration of wealth comes concentration of political power. And even that, which is not like an existential risk to people like nuclear catastrophes would be, we haven't really succeeded very well. I think in Europe, maybe you've done better than we've done in the United States, but it's a very big challenge.
So long as all the organization is for itself, organization means countries, governments, powerful corporations, and different lobbies like arms lobby. If everybody is for itself, unless the degree of cooperation is not there, I mean, it's going to be not easy. I'm being, let's say, trying to be as positively talking as possible. Anyway.
I think even though it's not easy and it's not, success is not guaranteed by any means, I think these are very important questions and we have to work on them. and make what progress we can, but we need to be realistic that, you know, there aren't going to be magic solutions to many of these problems.
Yeah, of course, after World War II, when the nuclear arms race started to develop, there were also extensive studies done. Research Rand Corporation is one of those that did that. And game theorists started looking into it. Let's say, at least based upon such insights, you could ultimately lead to arms treaties. Perhaps we stopped doing that kind of work and didn't foresee that at some moment in time, arms treaties would also get undermined because of proliferation, but also in particular, it gets undermined because of course, adverse relations between countries and too few topics on which you can collaborate. So you might also look into topics on which we did have good collaboration. The internet itself is a good example. That's where it happened. Perhaps global health is another good example. Or what about the planet, you know, in a wider sense? So there are some topics, not too small, in which global collaboration is the only way out.
No, I need to pop in. We've gone 5 minutes over the hour. There's clearly a lot of good conversation yet to be had, and excellent visions as to next steps we'd like to take, hopefully together. I do want to express before we lose everyone online, because everyone's calendars are so jammed, really express ISSIP's appreciation of Kazu and of Christine for the vision for the series in the first place, and for the service science knowledge, Christine and Jim, and the connections to make this such a meaningful series. And we thank all of our panelists for your time, your expertise. This has been extraordinary. And Kazu, did you have some closing remarks? And Christine?
Yeah, thank you very much. We could realize that the sandboxes or such some experimentation in society is very important issues to try to seek the next framework of the democracy utilizing the AI. But as we discussed in the second session, nurturing the foundation of common ground, trust among the community is very important as well in order to develop such kind of environment as well. So I will try to figure out the several questions or key questions for the next generation, and what is the issues for the researchers, and also what kind of challenges is necessary to develop the communities, not only inside of the research communities, but also the transdisciplinary, sectoral activities as well. That's my, what can I say? That's my takeaway from these sessions. Christine, please.
Thank you. Very, very briefly, I think my takeaway is to stay positive, considering the final, you know, final questions to the in the discussion, the point raised by Shrikant, and then Paul's answer. To be positive, I think international collaboration at all levels will be very important, and I'd like to point to a report from the United Nations that has been published just recently. I put it in the chat earlier. It's of the AI expert group of the United Nations, and it's called Governing AI for Humanity. And here a number of recommendations are actually included in the report. One is, of course, international cooperation, international governance, but also reinforced focus on research. And in that context, coming to research, I'm very happy that some of our HSSE service science community have joined today. I saw Markus Mark, I saw Steve Kwon, I saw Clara Bassano, I saw Deborah, I saw Christian, Steve Müller, I saw many of them, of course, Shrikant, and I'm sure you will help us to take the agenda forward. There's been lots of food for thought, how we could further, you know, develop research questions for us where we can contribute. And yeah, I'd like to thank all of you for coming. In particular, our panelists, very interesting insights. And I'll hand over to Kazu for the famous last words. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jim, and all the rest of you. Bye-bye.
Christian, thank you. Thank you very much for reminding the importance of the international collaboration. I should mention about the funding opportunities of Japan Science and Technology Agency that promotes the international collaboration, including this kind of AI and governance research, not only inside of the Japan, but also the international collaboration. And I guess European Commission also have such kind of programs. So we will try to figure out such kind of opportunities of white papers in order to facilitate the international collaboration among the ISSIP community and the broader communities. Please keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Michelle, yeah.
Thank you.